Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's very, very nice to be back doing webinars. We haven't done one since April, when we had our Global eFuture Day. So it's always nice to come back to familiar territory. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but for those of you that are here already, I know you're excited to talk about and to learn a little bit about English Wave, which we will get to, but a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat and talk to each other, share your thoughts, comments, all sorts of things. We love getting feedback from everybody. But if you have like really, really pressing questions that you want to ask and have us answer at the end of the webinar, please use the Q&A function. That way, I don't see the chat when I'm doing the presentation unless I take a break to do a quick glance. So if there are a lot of people talking, your questions could get lost in the chat. So use the Q&A for those big questions and then talk away in the chat as you are. My name is Joseph, for those of you that don't know me. I am an ELT consultant with eFuture. I've been with eFuture for about 3 years now. I'm here today to introduce a couple of new series, new coursebook series that eFuture will be debuting in just a few weeks. So we are really, really excited. English Wave is a long time coming, so we're looking forward to kind of kicking off sharing this book with the international market, I guess today, even though we've been kind of debuting it here and there. So I think we can go ahead and get started. We are right about at 11 o'clock, so let's go ahead and dive in. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about two different series here today. The first, I'm going to very quickly talk about Hand in Hand second edition. I'm just going to cover the new features because the main series, the brand new shiny series, is English Wave. So we'll spend most of our time with that. But I do want to touch on Hand in Hand because it is such a popular and beloved series here at eFuture. So in case, very quickly, if you are familiar or not familiar, Hand in Hand second edition is an elementary course book. It starts at the pre-A1 series and goes all the way to the A2 or A2 plus level for those of you that are interested in the CEFR leveling. And English Wave is going to have some overlap, but it's going to be a secondary course book. So even though there is level overlap, there are some critical differences between the A1 level, which is the beginning level of English Wave, and then as you can see, it goes all the way up to the B2, B2 plus leveling. But with Hand in Hand second edition, it's basically, we're going to see a lot of the same things in terms of the content, because the content is good. So we don't need to change too much there, fortunately. So the content that you're using, if you're using Hand in Hand, the first edition, the changeover to the second edition will not be a difficult one. The methodology is still based on global awareness. We still focus on 21st century skills, especially those 4 Cs, or if anybody that knows has been to any of my other presentations, they know it's not the 4 Cs anymore. It is the 6 Cs. And the basis of Hand in Hand is still those interdisciplinary learning skills. However, we have kind of beefed up the emphasis on CLIL and project-based learning somewhat. So we've got a few more little helpful tips and tools for project-based learning, and we want to make sure that the CLIL learning is still really, really strong. So we have slightly enhanced those through some of the tools that we have. But one of the big things for this new edition is the in-text tools and the upgraded digital support. So those new features, the first and foremost is that within the student book, we have Wiley test prep. So right now there are prep tests that you can use and download for the first edition of Hand in Hand. You can still use those. These tests are different from that. So you have additional practice tests to help with that. And all of the test prep materials that are included in the book will match the level. So if you're using the pre-A1 level Hand in Hand books, you will get the starter Wiley test. If you are using the A2, you will get the A2 key level tests. So that's one of the first main features. Another big one that is, I think, really, really helpful for teachers that use the project book in classes and are really committed to using project-based learning or problem-based learning styles of teaching in their classrooms. We have included a presentation rubric in the project book. So if you open the insert, the project book insert, there will be a rubric there to help guide teachers and students with the proper presentation skills, so they can work on that and practice on that, because that's a big element of project-based learning, is that final presentation. Some of the other big features, AI fluency practice. This is something that we have first rolled out with eFuture Discovery, but Hand in Hand is going to be one of the next levels or next series, I should say, that's using the AI fluency practice activities. These are going to be added to the online practice. So if you are using eSmartClass, you will and your students will have access to the fluency practice activities. The fluency practice builders are going to, AI fluency builder practice exercises will use dialogues that will help you improve your speaking skills. So it's basic one practice. It's a role play. The students will assume one of the characters in this dialogue. And then there's a full formative assessment that will do all of the other fluency builder assessing skills, like fluency, pronunciation, word speed, word per minute speed, things like that. And of course, these reports will be generated and they'll provide instant feedback for the students, but teachers and parents will also have access to these reports. And then finally, one of the new features to help teachers out will be the classroom PPTs, because these have become a very popular resource for our teachers. So Hand in Hand Second Edition will have these class PPTs available to teachers, and they'll be available for the student book and the workbooks. These are currently in development, so I don't have samples for you at this time, but they will be available with the other digital resources in a little while. So those are just a quick crash course on some of those key features, new features for Hand in Hand Second Edition. Here's what the kind of the facelift of the second edition of Hand in Hand looks like. You can see this on your screen. But this also brings me to a big difference between an elementary course book and a secondary course book. So what are the main differences here? But very, very simply put, the themes and content, they can be similarly presented, but they usually have a slightly different focus. The volume of content is going to be a significant difference. The goals and expectations are always different for an elementary learner versus a secondary learner. And that also means that the leveling and alignment is going to be different, because as you can see with Hand in Hand here, we're focusing on more foundational learning. We're learning things in context. There's a visual context to certain things. Whereas when we look at English Wave, we are kind of focusing on more of that exam prep style of learning, which is more common in secondary education. And this also means that the teaching strategies and approaches are different. So what I'm showing you here, this is Unit 9 from Hand in Hand Second Edition. This is the A1 level of this book. But here, this is also the A1 level of English Wave. So you can take a look and you can see the differences in presentation style, things like that. But what we can see here is that both of these units are actually talking about the same kind of themes, same kind of concepts, describing people meeting a teacher. That's kind of the same introductory content here. So you can see as I jump back and forth between these two pages, there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, a big difference is the volume of content. There's a lot more on the English Wave page than there is on the elementary primary level page. And that's because of our focus. One of the big focus differences in secondary is on how we present grammar. So here we have a bit more of an explicit teaching of grammar. You have a grammar chart for this specific simple present presentation of the be verb in its question forms, things like that. But here we have similar presentations of grammar, but we do it contextually for elementary level because they don't necessarily need to know grammar terminology to be able to be conversational. You'll also notice that the presentation of dialogues is different. Here we have it in comic form, and then it's presented here as a vocabulary and listening exercise. So there are subtle differences between leveling. But also the focus. So when we say describing people, there are a lot of different ways that we can describe people. Here, it's more physical traits for hand in hand. These are the kind of the base level foundational things that we do when we talk about describing people. But here, we're describing people in a more practical way. So we're talking about describing their contact information or describing their position relative to our own. So talking about somebody who is ready versus not ready is a different form of description, but it is also practical but also a bit more abstract and may not be appropriate for an elementary student necessarily. I'm not saying that it isn't, but the leveling here is clearly displayed. So getting into English Wave, the kind of specs on English Wave, it's a 6-level series, and it is specifically meant for secondary students. And this is the first secondary course book that eFuture has produced. That's why we're so excited about it. It's something that everybody has been asking for a long time now. But the approach, the methodology is still very similar and relatable to all of our other series. We still use a communicative approach to present information and to practice. The topics are real world, which means they are relatable, and the students should be able to apply them once they are comfortable with the themes. And we are really focusing on developing those essential language skills. One, so that they are prepared for assessments, whether they are the standardized assessments that students have to take when moving from high school to the university, or if they're going more technical or going towards a career after high school. So we want to make sure that the language skills are strong. But one thing that is very, very important as well is that we are encouraging critical thinking and collaboration. And I will show you how that kind of manifests itself in the book in just a moment. Basically, for the 6 levels, as I mentioned before, the CEFR level starts at the A1 level and goes up to the B2. Within a book, there are 12 regular units and then 6 review units, which we call school connections units. These are CLIL-based and project-based in structure. And then included, there are 2 test prep units, and these test prep units are designed to look like the YLE assessment as well. So, for those of you that are familiar with English, not with English Wave, with eFuture content and with eFuture course books, you might be wondering, okay, well, what does a B2 level versus an A1 level secondary course book content look like? And so here, this is from level 1. And this is the reading and writing, which is the final unit of a regular unit, which I'll explain that in a little bit. But you can see here on the left side of the page, we have some reading prompts that the students go through, some reading comprehension, and then a model that they would then create their own writing sample for. Now, once we get to the B2 level, you'll notice that there is a lot more content. So the leveling is progressive, but it's not overwhelming. So they can easily get from this to this because it is structured in a way that is familiar. So as the students work through the books, even though there might be more words on the page, they'll still be able to work through all of this content in a productive and progressive scaffolded way. To help them with this, there is a student book and a workbook, and for the teachers, there is a teacher's manual as well to guide you through each part of the lesson, give you suggestions and additional resources. For the digital components, it will be part of eSmartClass. There will be online practice. There are classroom ebooks for schools to use. There is audio streaming, just like any of our course books. And as I mentioned, the AI-based fluency practice that is in hand second edition is also going to be included in English Wave. And then, of course, we have plenty of downloadable resources. Some of the basics here, just to give you a quick rundown. The worksheets, we have 2 worksheets per unit. We have unit tests, midterm tests, and final tests. And then you have all of the usual PPTs and things like that. So let's talk about the actual book itself. And like I said, if you have any questions about any of this, go ahead and throw them into the chat or the Q&A, and we can discuss this, because I have a short amount of time today, but there's a lot of content to cover and discuss. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just kind of walk you through one of the units and talk about how each of these looks and is used. So we start with the unit introduction, and the introductions for this, if you're familiar with Smart Reading or eFuture Discovery as well, it looks very similar to that, where we have a big picture with some warm-up discussions just to kind of prime the students, get them ready for the lesson, the content, and the themes. The students can talk about what they know, what they're bringing from the outside into class. So we're starting to make those connections early on, and then we have those warm-up questions as well to kind of guide them if they're a little bit stuck. So we build in those warm-up activities from the get-go. We also introduce vocabulary. And when we introduce vocabulary, we actually start with introducing it through dialogue. So they're getting listening early on. They're getting the vocabulary presented to them in a familiar context as well. And then there's also a lot more vocabulary in each unit than you would see in a primary level course book, but they're getting all of this presented contextually. Once we get into the regular units, the typical units, each lesson will is 2 pages. How you divide this really depends on your class needs, your student needs, your class hours, things like that. But these 2 pages form one lesson here. And as we walk through it, lesson A starts with vocabulary practice. Again, this continues that trend of having less listening and reading being combined through dialogues, through the visual context of the images, the students being able to use things contextually. So there's critical thinking, there's discussion early on, and this can be student-led or teacher-led depending on your students and their abilities. But from there, we move into kind of closed readings and the first grammar structure. And our grammar structures are presented with helpful charts, some simple directions and instructions to guide them. And then they are, in the first practice, they are going to focus on kind of more of a reading writing activity as opposed to listening and speaking. But they take these grammar structures and they begin to use them to wrap up the lesson with the kind of the summative activity, I would call it, which is a guided communication exercise. Now, I really, really like these activities because I can't tell you how many times I have gone into classrooms or even with when I was teaching secondary level students. One of the hardest things to overcome in a class that is conversation based is human nature. Students in high school are shy, especially if they are not confident in their own abilities. And so teachers have to overcome that before they can even really get into the content things. So getting them comfortable with speaking and speaking in small groups or speaking in pairs is really, really important, because once they get over that hurdle of discomfort with just speaking and experimenting with language, it makes a lot of the learning a lot more easy. So building in these communicative exercises in each of the lessons is really, really important, just to get your students comfortable and ready to go. So this is something that's really helpful. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but that a little extra effort and emphasis on getting your students talking to each other and working independently is very, very important. It's critical at these stages, especially if they are trying to catch up to other students if you're in a mixed level class. So building confidence is really, really important. And we hope that this book will help instill that confidence from the get-go. Um, then once we move into our second lesson, lesson B, the structure will look familiar. There are a couple of tweaks here and there. So again, we start with vocabulary practice. We start with dialogues and to encourage listening as well. But then the second activity, instead of a reading activity, it's going to be a listening activity to reinforce those skills. There's still ways to build in extra conversation. You can build in extra writing if you want to as well. And then we get to our second grammar structure. And this time, rather than doing writing and reading, unscrambling the sentences that way, this time it is a listening activity. So you can see how lesson A and lesson B, the grammar and the vocabulary sides kind of switch skills, but we're still using all four skills. And then, again, we finish up with a summative speaking activity. Again, this is focusing on the themes of the unit. It's getting the students to think critically, and it's creative as well, which is also very, very important. So all of this is to support the students getting that critical thinking and creativity, letting them show that in the class. And the reason for this is because of the project-based learning elements that come later. Getting them comfortable now will make it easier once they get into those formal presentations and assessments, things like that. Okay, so moving into lesson 5C, this is unit 5, so lesson C, we transition not so much from the vocabulary dialogue dynamic. We still are using the dialogues but in a slightly different way. This time we're using useful expressions. Now, if you are familiar with Magic Speaking, this format should look pretty familiar to you as well, because in Magic Speaking, the third unit or the third lesson of a unit is that useful expression, which doesn't necessarily relate to the theme of the unit, but they are helpful expressions that enhance the unit theme and are still practical and useful every day. So these useful expressions are really, really important. And we have dialogues that are used to show that and practice all of these. And these dialogues are also incorporated into the fluency building exercises in the online practice as well. The students are also able to practice the vocabulary that they have been learning. It's still being repeated, and we have linking and reviewing between lessons A, B, and C. All of that is being connected here. And Rather than grammar study here, we are doing what we call word study, which is still somewhat of a grammar practice, but it's being used in a slightly different way. And we are concluding with those same speaking activities that are kind of a summative wrap up for each of these lessons. These ones, again, are emphasizing those four C's, the six C's of uh, the kind of the global skills that we need, 21st century skills. So all of that is getting wrapped up quite nicely here. But again, it allows the students to work collaboratively. It allows them to show off their creativity and to personalize this as well. So you can see with this activity here, they're taking turns asking and answering questions based on these pictures and on the dialogues that they've been practicing with. But it's really for them to reflect on what they do, what they know. Some students by high school in some countries, not all countries, but uh, some students already have like a part-time job or something like that that they do, and they can talk about that and they can share their experiences. Or, I mean, they are more independent, so they're going to see the world as they move through it. So they can bring in those things and they can talk about the people that they see working at, say, a coffee shop or in the mall or whatever. So they have those experiences, and this encourages them to bring those into their learning. And then finally, we get to lesson D, which is our reading and writing lesson. So we start off with a couple of reading samples. It's usually going to be about three samples, little paragraphs about a person, and they're relating it to the unit theme. Here we're talking about summer jobs. And it shows three different jobs, three different people from three different places. And it talks about their experiences. These are pretty relatable, so you're not going to see necessarily somebody talking about working on the stock exchange as a summer job. That wouldn't really resonate with a high school student, not every high school student anyway. And then we follow that up with some reading comprehension. And this immediately flows into our reading model. So, or our writing model, I should say. So our writing exercises are scaffolded to guide students, and there's a very helpful checklist at the bottom to help our students when they are writing their original paragraphs. So they read the model, which is similar to the reading samples that they have on the other page, and then they prepare by writing down the main information in this little organizer, which they then turn into a full paragraph. And then, of course, the checklist helps prepare the students for revision, peer review. It also helps the teachers to make sure that they are keeping track of everything that the students are writing. Because if you're in a class of 20 students, checking 20 paragraphs is not something that can be done very easily. So this will help the teachers as well as the students. And then you can also notice down at the bottom here, it's a little small, but activity D there is, you'll see read other classmates' paragraphs. So peer review is incorporated into this activity as well. It's not just the teacher that is reading these paragraphs, it is the students that are reading each other's work and critiquing each other's work, guiding each other, helping each other. That's really, really important as well. Finally, the last little bit that I will talk about in terms of the book tour are the school connection lessons. So after every two units, two regular units, there will be a school connection activity. And the school connection activities are wonderful because just like any of our course books with the unit reviews, the section reviews, Jump Up if you're familiar with Smart English, the World Link, things like that. These are going to review all of the target language from the previous two units, but also combine them and present them in a slightly different context. So the school connection here is roll the credits, and we're talking about movies, and we're talking about jobs. And that's because Unit 6, which I didn't show you, is about movies. And Unit 5, which I did show you, is about summer jobs. So we're combining those two themes into one and the students will read about different jobs that go into making a movie, and then they will do a simple language focus, again, a review of key vocabulary and new vocabulary, things like that. And they start discussing because what they're going to do is they're going to create their own project. So there is a project book that is included in the student book to help guide them. Uh, and they will take this and students will create a simple presentation. They'll go through the project. And if schools use a more formal project-based learning curriculum, they can start here to kind of brainstorm and get students ready to go through the full process of project-based learning. So it's a nice guide. It's a great extension, and it's really really useful for those PBL activities. Now it's very very important to talk about what project-based learning is as we go through this. So we start here. Like I said, this is what the project book will guide the students with. So it gives them some basic instructions, some roles, what they're going to do. So the project is they have to make a movie. And they need to choose what kind of movie that they're making. They're going to have to assign roles and then determine what those roles will do. So the project book provides this really wonderful outline for the students, which outlines their process through a project-based learning activity. It also outlines their roles and responsibilities during a presentation. So the teachers can guide students through the PBL process using the project book, and then the students, when they're working independently, can refer back to this to keep them on task. The project book is really, really important because of the kind of free flow of ideas that it encourages. The students aren't going to be necessarily restricted into right or wrong for their projects. They will problem solve as they go through. So it's incredibly flexible and it encourages creativity. Then, especially for students that are going through formal project-based learning or inquiry-based learning curriculum, this will help them guide their research as they go through for those bigger presentations. So what I mean by this is that this serves as an actual activity, but it is also a guide for the students. But it gets them started on the project-based learning process. So the project-based learning process is something that is really quite formal. It starts with having language targets, which is what the course book is going to provide for the students. They have a basis. It requires the students to use the student book and to study with it, to review the language regularly, and that means use small games and activities, partnered activities, things like that, before you can even begin the project. So you have to have those language targets established, and the project book really does kind of formalize that. Then for problem-based and project-based learning, you propose a problem. So in this case, if I'm doing this make a movie thing, the problem is pretty simple. It's you need to make a movie. What movie will you make? Who is going to be responsible for what aspects of that? So it's a simple problem, but you're going to propose that to the students, and then they need to find a way to come up with this, with solving this problem independently. In order to do that, the teacher needs to kind of lead them at first, and that means discussing what the students know about the problem. Fortunately for our students, they go through and they have the School Connections reading passages to learn about movies and the process of making a movie, because it's not necessarily a clear thing. That's not something that we would expect them to learn. So that's very, very important. It's really, really important too that we make real life connections here, not just about learning the new language, but show them real life materials, realia, whether it is interviews and documentaries on how the process of making a movie. It can be watching a movie itself and having them identify, who did this, things like that. So giving them real objects to connect, bringing their real experiences in is part of that discussion. That's very, very important. And then research. For secondary level students, project-based learning, they need to know how to do research. And this goes into information literacy and all sorts of things. That's a completely different presentation. I'm not going to cover that here. I don't have enough time for that. But research is an important component of project-based learning, finding the information and showing how it solves their problem. And that's where we get synthesis. So they do the research and they prove that the research is useful to them and useful to their problem. We don't do this in the book. The students have to do this by going beyond the book. We provide them with the language and the skills to know how to search for this information and to know how to synthesize it. And then the students make a self-directed learning project of some kind. They make a presentation. And this can be quite difficult if they don't really have an idea, if they don't have an understanding of what the problem is. Creating a presentation on a problem that they don't understand can be really, really challenging. So we need to make sure that they have solid grounding beforehand. And then comes the presentation. So this is something that is a cumulative thing, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I think a lot of teachers, they think, I want to do project-based learning in my class, but they forget how much time it takes. So hopefully with English Wave, with the amount of information, the content that we provide in the book, it will help reduce the amount of planning and prep that the teachers have to do to get their students ready to go through these projects. So they don't have to do this full process for each of the school connections. They can do it maybe once a year, once a term, once a semester, whatever. But they have the guidelines within the book, and with the assistance of their teachers, they should be able to get through all of this pretty well. Let me get some water here. Now, some of the other inclusions in the English Wave student book that are really, really useful, really, really important are these test prep sections. You could treat them almost as a midterm and final kind of review or assessment. So they're practicing and reviewing the language and content that they've learned in the previous 6 units. So Test Prep 1 covers units 1 through 6. Test Prep 2 covers units 7 through 12. But if this looks familiar, and it should, that is because this test prep is modeled after the Cambridge assessment. So depending on your book level, you'll have the A2 key version, the B1 preliminary, or the B2 first version of this test prep included in the book. And this is helpful not just for students that take the Cambridge assessment, it's helpful for students that are also taking TOEFL. I know that TOEFL is changing the way that they score so that there are clearer crosswalks between the TOEFL test and the Cambridge test. So students who are taking either one will be able to make easy comparisons. But it's also useful for general test prep for the school's examinations, pop quizzes, things like that, because it's teaching not just taking a test and reviewing the language, but it is also providing them with test-taking skills as well. One of the other really big inclusions, really important, nice inclusions for English Wave is the grammar appendix. As I went through each of the lessons, you maybe saw a note about the grammar sections, that there was additional practice in the grammar appendix. So for lessons A and B, there is extra practice right in the back of the book to help students who want additional review or need additional review. This can be done as homework. This can be done for those students or used for those students that finish ahead of their other classmates. They can do a little extra practice with those specific grammar targets that they have been practicing. So there's a nice little review thing, and there also is a helpful little additional explanation that is included with each of these grammar targets as well. I really like the grammar appendix because it can be used as classroom review. You can use this as part of your warm up or your wrap up, but it is also really useful for self study as well. So it can be assigned as homework, but if students just want to do a little extra practice, they have that option right in the book. And then, of course, we have the workbook, which has all of our additional practice that is included. So it matches the structure and flow of the student books, just like any of our other course books would. And what we have for it within the workbook, the unit intro gets 1 page, and then each of the lessons A through D will get 2 pages in the workbook of additional practice. The workbook typically is going to emphasize reading and writing activities because it can be done at home or it can be done in the classroom. So it provides flexibility for the teachers. Not everybody is going to be able to complete the student book and workbook in the classroom. That shouldn't be an expectation that you have. So if you want to assign homework, you can, and the students will be able to work independently without much guidance from the teacher in the moment. This means that they can work in pairs, they can work in groups, they can work independently. The teacher doesn't need to be there for them to go through the workbook. It's always helpful to have the teacher there, but that's not always not always the case. So the workbook is nice, it's flexible, and it will help the students learn especially in large classes where the teacher might not get to all of the students in one class. This is another way for the students to get practice on their own without getting caught up and falling behind everybody else. We also have 2 worksheets, additional worksheets that are included, or these are downloadables. So each unit will get a vocabulary practice worksheet and a grammar practice worksheet. And these, like I said, will be downloadable. You can get these off of eSmartClass, and the students can use these again for additional practice or as homework. It's really up to the teachers to decide how they want to use these, but they are available as an additional resource. So teachers, you can't complain that there's not enough content with English Wave for your secondary students because there is quite a bit of information to get through. And then finally, we have unit tests as well. So each unit will have a downloadable unit test, which is an optional assessment that you can do between units if you want to. These should be used before you do the test preps, obviously, because the test prep is going to be more comprehensive. But this is just kind of a mini quiz, a mini test if you want. It's reading and writing based primarily, and it will assess students' grammar, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. So that's the main focus here. So really, really useful, nice little quiz for your students to get used to. And in the last little bit of time that I have, I want to talk about the AI fluency practice because this is a new bit of a new digital tool that we have introduced this year, and we haven't had a webinar to really talk about this. So this is a good chance to talk about this as it relates to English Wave and as it relates to Hand in Hand as well. But basically, this is a form of online practice that uses AI to assess our students in the moment. I highly recommend that they use headphones and a microphone when they're doing this, because if you're using just your phone or you're using the computer's microphone, it's not as effective. It's always good to have a microphone. Bluetooth earbuds aren't always all that effective either. So it is, I should say, have proper devices to maximize the accessibility of your students' speaking and reading skills as they go through this. But basically, the AI fluency practice is it's a speaking and reading fluency program. It provides students with real-time feedback, and it also provides teachers with that feedback as well. For English Wave, there are two types of AI-based fluency practice. There's the speaking practice, which uses dialogues. The students will start with listening to those dialogues, and then they'll do a role play, which you can kind of see on the screen here. I'll go into more specifics in just a moment. And then we have the reading AI fluency. So this is much more similar to what we have for for eFuture Discovery, where it's a three-step process with a reading practice, shadowing, and then a full passage assessment. These are, there are samples of the actual discovery version of the Fluency Builder on the eFuture website. So if you are curious about that, you can look on the eFuture website for those, for little samples, trials of those. But for English Wave, these will be fully available in the coming weeks. But for now, I'll just give you some quick samples here. So what we have, we start with the listening practice. As you can see, you have the full dialogue here. These dialogues are coming from the units themselves. So the students will be exposed to these and they will be familiar with them before they get onto eSmartClass to practice with these, but they'll be guided through these and they'll hear these dialogues with a natural speech pattern. It'll help them with pronunciation as well. And they can kind of, as they listen to these, they can shadow along if they wish. And then they get into the role play, where they become one of the characters in the dialogue. And they will have an interactive role play where they will respond to the other person in the dialogue, either using the actual dialogue that's included in the book, or they can even, I believe they will be able to respond with their own expressions as well. If they are struggling, there are hints for them to guide them with how to answer those questions. But these are really, really helpful because the students can track their progress and they can do these a few times before their scores become final. For the reading, the students are going to, like I said, they go through three processes. They start with the reading, just a simple portion of it, either a paragraph or a couple of sentences. They practice that. They can change the speed at which they listen to or speak these reading passages. And then they go through a process of shadowing, which is not, there's no AI assessment there. It's just practice before the formal assessment where they'll read a full passage here. This is just a sample image. And then they get a full report, which will give them their word per minute reading speed. It will give them their pronunciation accuracy, things like that. And like I said, students, teachers, and parents will be able to see the reports that are generated from these. Parents need a parent account for them to do that, but teachers can provide feedback as well through these reports. It's a really, really helpful. It's a nice addition to the online practice, and it allows the students to do a little bit more, and for the students or for the teachers to provide additional feedback based off of what the students are doing online. So I am coming to the end of my presentation. I think I'm doing remarkably well for timing. But if you have questions about English Wave or Hand in Hand Second Edition or any of our other course books or skill books, you can consult one of our distribution partners. If you, in one of our countries, if you don't see your country listed here, you can just contact us at eFuture. Our email address is inquiry@eltkorea.com. We are happy to answer questions. We expect that there will be a lot of questions about English Wave because it is a new series. but the books will be available very, very soon. It just depends on our distributors for the specific availability. So it's best to talk to them, talk to our partners for those specifics on availability and pricing and shipping and all that stuff. So thank you all very, very much for being here. It's wonderful to be back with and doing a webinar again. It's been a long time since we've done one. So thank you all very, very much. I have time now for questions. But of course, if you don't have questions now, you can always ask us questions by contacting us. My email is there. The eFuture inquiry email is there as well. So thank you very, very much. See you again soon. Bye-bye.